Welcome back to another episode of the Chill Film Discussions.
Today we discuss a film called Of Mice and Men. It's an adaptation of a novella of the same name, written by John Steinbeck in 1937. The film itself was released in 1992, and it was directed and produced by Gary Sinise. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, so I probably butchered it. But anyway, it's about character of George and Lenny, who are trying to find work in the Great Depression, and then of course Lenny is mentally disabled, so George is basically trying to take care of him, and they sort of like find work on a ranch, and according to this movie, sort of details like their life on as like workers on this ranch.
Right.
The movie itself delves into like I think a big theme of like loneliness and whether or not having freedom just by yourself, being able to do what you want by yourself is worth that loneliness. Is it worth the cost of being lonely? And of course that sort of movie, the movie itself kind of explores that theme through different characters. There's a ton of other side characters in this movie who are lonely. For instance, like Candy, who is an older man with an older dog. The dog gets, the dog is sick. He gets put down, and then Candy becomes really, almost empty, lonely after his dog gets put down. There's Curly's wife, who is unnamed. She doesn't even have an identity that we can associate with, and she is, no one wants to talk to her because she's sort of associated with Curly, who is. No one wants to associate with Curly because he's a big dick. So anyway, no one talks to her. So she is lonely as well. And of course, there's also Crooks, who is sort of ostracized because he's black, and of course, it's like back in the day. So it's the racism going on there. But anyway, George and Lenny were not lonely. They had each other, but of course, George had to take care of Lenny. And he couldn't like do whatever he wanted to do because of sort of like having to take care of Lenny. But at least they weren't alone. But in the end, kind of flips the script on that sort of state. And yeah, I think the movie itself is very straightforward. It's not very complicated. It just follows these two characters in a relationship, and actually kind of like these two characters, what makes it interesting is that this movie doesn't really, like, we don't really see them grow per se. Like these two characters are kind of like almost static in some sense. Like you see how they sort of behave in in their daily life as workers on a ranch, but there's not a lot of growth going on, which is actually very interesting because it sort of like implies that they've been through this, they've kind of gone through this, and despite another occurrence of like trying to start their lives again, like it kind of, nothing comes out of it, which is almost sad in itself, almost as sad and somber as like with the ending, kind of ending happens where Mercy kills Lenny and gets his freedom, but then ends up being lonely at the end. So yeah, I kind of liked how. I mean, this movie was almost 2 hours long, but like I think the pacing was fine. I think it was not a lot happening, but enough where like you as a viewer didn't really know what was. There were some moments when like there was tension built up. Mercy killings on both sides, both the bulldog and Lenny. Of course, there was the climax where Lenny kind of like his interaction with Curly's wife and. Sort of like leading up to her death, like there was enough happening, but like it doesn't feel like there's too much. Like it feels like these scenes are able to like sort of breathe, they're able to progress, and sort of like there's enough action, there's enough things going on such that like it's methodical almost, which is really nice to see in some sense. But yeah, overall the movie, I think the acting was pretty good. This plot was straightforward. I was, eventually invested in these characters, so it was sort of nice to see. Also, just like seeing the theme kind of play, like freedom versus like loneliness, almost kind of like interplay throughout the movie is also very nice to see. But yeah, overall very solid movie, I would say.
Yeah.
So
I I yeah, I agree with you on the most part. This is a pretty solid movie with a pretty solid kind of story. Um, are you doing something? I hear a lot of static
nope, I'm not doing anything.
now. um, so yeah, I think they're it's pretty solid story.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know why when I start speaking I hear the
Okay,
um
is it better now?
okay, sorry. Yeah, pretty solid story. And you know, with pretty solid characters here, and just especially the relationship between George and Lenny. I think is what this movie, especially, is trying to portray, and it's a good relationship, right? How much George takes care of Lenny. Sometimes I do question why George really is going out so going so far for Lenny, but it really shows that he really cares about him, even though they were just childhood friends. He does a lot to make sure Lenny gets out of trouble and make sure that both of them can survive, right? And Lenny kind of understands this fact and is very very aware. But this relationship is really what is the crux of this movie. I mean, it's great to see how they care for each other, how George kind of deals with the situations that they get into, right? As you said, there's not too much happening in this film, but there's enough to show the different themes and elements, right? That they're trying to portray. Right? A lot, as we said before, is about loneliness, how you get over it, or just how portraying how these characters are lonely, maybe pulling kind of the lessons from each of these characters and how to deal with it and how to go about it in our own lives, right? So the story is definitely more. I feel like I said it before, more literary, academic, right? Where you can get the foreshadowing, get all the stories, the themes, allegories from it. It really make you. This movie kind of makes you think if you really want to watch it. I mean, you don't have to if you watch. You can just take it as it is. But I feel like then it becomes a little bit boring if you don't, right? Otherwise, you really need to sit down and see what's kind of like the subtext of it trying to say here. I mean, it's not like it's like too subtle, but there's definitely lessons and things that you can take away from this movie. But it is a pretty straightforward movie, solid film in terms of just like talking about these characters. But I would say, I mean, while there is kind of this emotional depth, it doesn't nothing too much happens, right? Not especially until the end, where it all kind of picks up really really quickly with Lenny killing his wife. But enjoyable story, movie to the end, watching it to the end. Never really questioned on how it's paced, but I think just sometimes questioning on like what's going on at times, leading up to it, but it all made sense. So I did enjoy this movie too.
Cool. Nice. I sort of muted myself there in case there was a lot of static, but I hope there was no more static right now. All right.
Good now.
Nice. So I guess for our final ratings, I'm going to give this movie... I'm going to give this movie an 8. I think it's solid. I think there were parts where, like, I wish there was a bit more, I guess, context with Jordan and Lenny's relationship, and maybe could have been like flashbacks and whatnot to sort of like make me not necessarily care more about them, but just because I had questions of like why
just understanding right,
yeah.
George's position and what their relationship. I agree.
Yeah. I think there could have been a little bit more context with that. I mean, it's not necessary, but like I think personally it would have been better to sort of understand why exactly George cares so much about Lenny, despite how much he talks about not wanting to be with Lenny. So that would have been nice. I think, yeah, I mean, I think that's like mainly the biggest thing that I wish there was a bit more of. But overall, solid movie. I would recommend it. I think it's it's definitely a slower movie, so if you're into like a lot of action and if you're not as you're easily bored by slower movies, then yeah, it's probably not for you. But in general, I'd recommend it. It's solid, and it has a nice theme to it too. So I think it makes you think.
I'd give it an 8 as well. I think it, it's a good movie. You know, good. Oops, there's this static again.
Okay.
It's a good movie, and it you know it does. I think it does a good job telling telling the relationship between George and Lenny, and you know as you said, it does seem slow at times, but at the same time, um, it kind of just gets your attention, like going to see what will happen next, and it's kind of like a smaller vignettes kind of combined into this large story. You have like smaller pieces before with an overarching arc, right? Of just like about this loneliness and how they're gonna get by and how they're gonna survive. So it is something enjoyable, and it's pretty well made. Very different, I think, from a lot of movies today, where it's just it's like action or the tones are more somber. But here, I feel like it's nicer the way that they execute it, right? Just not just the story and characters, but just the way that it was shown. I remember the beginning, just like when they're running away, just like from the other people who are trying to get them. It's just like it's nice to see this kind of imagery of like cowboys chasing them, right? It has a different feel to it from like this is a 1990s film, right? I believe.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, 1992, right? It's a different way that they made a movie. It feels more realistic, kind of, because it's probably more practical than a lot of today's stuff, which is like CG and whatnot. So it has a nice feel just even watching it. It's more appealing. So yeah.
Nice.
And I would recommend it. So.
Yes. Yes, the film was actually 92. I realized I was muted just, to avoid the static, but, yeah. Apologies for that. Next week we'll have it fixed. I think the audio this week will be real bad, unfortunately, but yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll be back next week, yes?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Alright,
Yeah,
cool. For me too. Alright, we'll figure out the movie that we're going to discuss next week. Shortly after, we'll update the schedule. And then, yeah, that's it for today. I hope you guys have a great day if you watch it. And we'll see you again next time. Cheerio!
Bye!